Our last candidate of the evening, Sema Hernandez.
Oh, hello. Hello. Hi, how are you?
Great, how are you?
I'm trying not to fall off this seat. Tell you what.
I told Kevin about these seats, by the way.
I can't, not much I can do is last minute.
Well, it's not the seat so much, it's just my dresses, but.
Oh, it's the seat. It is. If y'all follow me on Twitter, you will know that these seats are discriminatory to women because we have skirts on oftentimes, and it's hard to sit appropriately. So now you know.
Well, we'll make do.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here.
Absolutely. Why you? Why now?
Well, let's see. There is so much discontent with our political system at the moment. We have so many disenfranchised voters, so many people in need. I have had the experience of one being a fence line community member who lives in Pasadena, Texas, that is impacted by the fossil fuel industry, and nothing has changed in our communities. We have healthcare inequality. We have the highest poverty rate in the state of Texas. I've traveled the entire state of Texas during 2018 when I ran for US Senate, and I haven't stopped since. I then became the Texas co-chair for the Poor People's Campaign, and which is an amazing organization, by the way. Go join Poor People's Campaign, unitethepoor.com. I'm sorry, .org. And I haven't stopped campaigning across the state, and I traveled far and wide. Just recently I went to El Paso, which, by the way, it's about a 1,700-mile drive, and I met some amazing people, and what I saw the most was the same things that are happening in my area in Pasadena are the same things that are happening in rural Texas, which is the same fight for healthcare, the same fight for clean air, for clean water, and ensuring that we have someone in the Senate to represent those issues that matter most to the Texas people is what I want to do. My platform, my campaign platform, is what I live and breathe every day. And it's something that I do not compromise on. And as United States Senator, I know that I will not compromise on the people of Texas. And this will be an absolute opportunity to genuinely represent the needs of the most vulnerable communities, specifically the sacrifice zones in which we are, in which we are living in. It's difficult for me to really sit here and talk about myself because I'm not known to be a very selfish person. I have worked in healthcare for 6 years. I was an insurance agent. I was a baseball coach. I'm a community organizer for human rights and civil rights. I have now been working with environmental justice organizations to bring the fossil fuel industry to be held accountable, including the TCEQ, ensuring that companies like Valero are not polluting our communities of Manchester, here in Houston, with hydrogen cyanide. We are needing bold leadership that is willing to take on not just John Cornyn, but his donors. And I think that now more than ever is the time to do it. And 2018 was a pivotal moment in which a progressive campaign was able to garner 24% of the vote in places that most Democrats haven't won since Governor Ann Richards. And that's something that I look forward to being the United States Senator and replacing John Cornyn.
As you know, winning statewide in Texas is an expensive proposition. Right? According to the third quarter finance report, you've raised about $7,500 compared to some of the other folks in the field at $500,000 and $1 million. The question is, how will you beat John Cornyn with this rate of fundraising? Do you anticipate it picking up?
Well, one, I want to reiterate that 2018, I ended up getting 250,000 votes. That's 24% of the vote in areas that no other Democrat has ever won since Governor Ann Richards. And we did that on a $4,000 budget, a shoestring budget, which proves that money doesn't always equal votes. And you can raise $80 million and still lose to someone like Ted Cruz. when our campaign was unapologetically human and honest and genuine and reached so many voters on such a low budget. That should prove to anyone, especially John Cornyn, that he should be very afraid of a moral leader with people that are volunteering every single day for a campaign, that we are going to win, and money should not be a factor in this race.
This is the Gracie question again, and in a way it's related to fundraising, but more broadly, what do you see as your path to victory in this race?
Well, one, we definitely do need donations, and they are going to pick up, God willing, soon. But I am proud to not have been taking any super PAC money, any corporate PAC money, and not accepting any Wall Street bundlers, as well as signing the No Fossil Fuel Money Pledge and the Divest from War Pledge, which limits me to actually raising money from grassroots people just like you in this room that allow us to take on the system, but also people who are not able to donate because, let's just face it, our financial situation, everyone is strapped for cash. But the one thing that people are able to give is their time and their love and their devotion for a campaign that is truly going to represent them. And we've been able to get a lot of voters to come out and support our campaign and tell their friends word of mouth that that's what works, is people talking to each other and reaching their friends, their relatives through either Facebook Messenger, through text messaging, implementing that on a broad level is something that not a lot of politicians do. They usually do things by the book. But because we are an unconventional grassroots campaign, I'm confident that we are able and fully capable of taking on someone like John Cornyn.
You mentioned environmental justice is very important to you. Why? Is that sort of a driving factor? To talk about why that is.
Well, as I said, I live in Pasadena and I'm a fence line community member. In Pasadena, I look at our area as the sacrifice zone. And a sacrifice zone, what it looks like is environmental racism. And it predominantly affects Black and brown communities. And where I live in, it is I-10, 610, 225. It's the energy corridor. It's fossil fuel. The fossil fuel industry is right there in my neighborhood. I breathe in the chemicals. I take my kids to school every day. Shell oil is right across the freeway from my kids' high school. This is something I live and breathe every single day. And taking on the fossil fuel industry so that we can get environmental justice, so we can have a Green New Deal, that is something that I am passionate about, because a Green New Deal not only will generate a renewable energy source, something that is publicly owned, something that will have a stable economy and stable growth that will allow us not to go into these imperialistic wars for oil. This is, to me, it's huge, it's broad, and it's reaching across so many spectrums, from addressing poverty, addressing jobs, to ending the war economy, to ending the racism, to dismantling systemic poverty and dismantling systemic racism. That is extremely important when you talk about environmental justice and addressing environmental racism at its core. Where I live in, when I look through the history, that used to be a place where there was cotton fields and strawberry fields. And now it's the fossil fuel industry. And it's no surprise that they transitioned the white landowners, the white slave owners transitioned the slaves that they had there to build their oil infrastructure. So to address and come after the fossil fuel industry, you have to bring up their ugly past and who they're donating money to. And the person who is upholding their white nationalism, white supremacy for capitalist interests is John Cornyn. And so taking that on and being unapologetic about saying the truth, that is what gets voters, that is what gets people motivated and trusting that I will do what is necessary to defend them and protect them from the fossil fuel industry.
What do folks here and voters watching us online not know about you that they need to know about you?
Ooh, child, that is a lot. Well, first off, on Thanksgiving dinner, I really don't like Thanksgiving. I just like the idea of making a 20-pound turkey in the oven and just feasting on it. But I cook really good and I bake really good pies. But what you don't know about me is that I have an immense work ethic. And I made a promise to someone in 2018 when I was visiting Montgomery Democratic Party. A gentleman said, Sema Hernandez, promise me no matter what you do, win or lose, that you're going to continue to fight for us. And I said to him, I will absolutely fight for you. I will not stop. And I will do everything necessary to ensure that you have someone that is going to represent you. And I've been able to do that successfully. I've been involved in voting rights issues. I've been involved in immigration issues where our elected representatives could not get a United States citizen out of the ICE detention center. I organized to free that man, young man, 18-year-old United States citizen being held by ICE. I was able to work together in a coalition to get him free. So that shows that we do have the people power, we do have the motivation within our social media connections to generate a movement that will help free someone who was held behind against their will and was essentially tortured to give up his citizenship. These are things that we can do. We have organized around the ITC disaster. There are things that a lot of people don't know that I do every single day besides being a mom of 4 kids. All boys, by the way, which is not easy, but I can tell you it's never boring. These are things that I know how to do. I know how to triage people in emergency cases. I was able to analyze frontwards and backwards the fallout of an ITC disaster and what it would look like on a massive level if one of the fossil fuel industry's refineries explodes and causes a domino effect in our area. And we do not have a level 1 trauma center in our area, which we do absolutely need. And understanding what that looks like from head injuries to decapitation, and I know it sounds really disgusting, but again, I'm not afraid of taking on these challenges because I've done them before. I've been in the field, in the medical field, working on this, and assessing the needs of the people is something that I'm capable of doing, not just thinking in a small, broad space of what would happen if there's another explosion. It's what happens to our health, what happens to our economy, what happens to the people outside of our area. And knowing that's how my mind works, I'm going to ensure that no matter what piece of legislation I introduce, I know how it's going to impact you. And the one thing I want to be sure is that I will create legislation, amend legislation, introduce legislation that will not impact the people in a negative way. I will not compromise on the people.
We asked this earlier, I'll ask it a little bit different way. The U.S. is seeing the highest rates of income inequality in 50 years. In Texas, it's one of the worst states. What policies do you support to encourage economic growth, right, while also helping level the playing field for everyday Texans?
Well, one is supporting the $15 minimum wage, first and foremost. 2 is undoing the right to work laws in every state, allowing people to unionize and organize against industry who decides to oppress them, to address the immigration laws that look at undocumented workers as expendable and as exploitable, because when we have undocumented people and they're working for industry, they are mistreated, they are exploited, and they are threatened with deportation or worse. We saw it happen with the chicken processing plant, the poultry plant, in which the owner ended up calling ICE, allegedly, and over 600 people were arrested by ICE. There's a massive raid. But the problem is that we're not charging the industry leader with any crimes. Instead, we're criminalizing people who are showing up to go to work every day. So addressing and changing those laws to make sure people are not exploited. Implementing a Green New Deal is absolutely crucially important, especially for this area. We want to be able to transition into green, renewable, and sustainable energy. We want to give the power back to the people instead of power to industry. So we want to make it public. I want to make it public. I want to be able to employ people locally. We want to ensure that we have training and that there isn't any student debt that the student debt is eliminated, and that there is paid apprenticeships, and that there is a sustainability factor that is included in that plan to ensure that the workers from the fossil fuel industry have a just transition. That way our economy is not lagging because of the fossil fuel industry having such a stronghold. Ending the subsidies for the fossil fuel industry is also important to do. I don't know how much oil subsidy or government subsidies Valero has, but I know that they made $93 billion in revenue. And quite honestly, they don't need the subsidies. What we need to do is fund our education system, ensure that the teachers are paid a living wage. And this idea of trickle-down economics, it just does not work. We've been doing that for decades, and this is what we have, a decimated economy that has outsourced all of our jobs overseas. We need to be sure that we have jobs here at home, and that we are employed, and that we have a decent wage, and that we get back the ability to live and thrive without having to work 3 to 4 jobs, which is something that my mother did, and I've experienced that end of poverty. No one should be living in poverty, and especially no one should be living in poverty in this country. We should not have veterans that are homeless on the street after they've given so much of their lives to this country to be left out in the cold.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming again. Really appreciate it.
Early voting started this week. If y'all haven't voted already, do it. All right.
I'll keep them. I'll keep them. I have a. Yes, and I'll take them. Now, if you want to come to the club, you know what? It's so late already. Okay, because I live by the stadium, and I'm afraid if I get there too late. We're not. Yeah.